Hello guys, new video. We're going to be very alert, and the only thing that matters right now is the Clarity Act. As I said, I'm 100% sure that not the Clarity Act, it's just a markup for the Clarity Act. It's gonna take maybe a few more weeks if they pass this, I believe, just to approve the Clarity Act. Now, I'm going to make what I believe is going to be the accelerated version of the adoption of XRP and how the PQ will be moving incrementally vertical, I would say, not incrementally, vertical compared to other assets. And we're going to give you some price scenarios and also the time frame that I expect this is going to happen under a stress scenario, which is what we are facing right now. I might be wrong in the timing because nobody has the crystal ball, but believe me when I tell you these prices that we're going to reach are going to happen, 100% sure that it's going to happen. If you think it's still too high, it's because you're still in the old paradigm. Forget about Bitcoin. If Bitcoin was absolutely a piece of garbage, it's that expensive. This is a collateral asset. This is going to be the biggest asset the world has ever seen. So let's start. In a stressed liquidity, starved geopolitically unstable environment as we are seeing today, with the war, with the economy, with the liquidity, and also I'm going to show you and explain you why we are in these situations. XRP corridor activation does not follow the slow regulatory timeline. It's not going to take years. It's not going to go slowly, incrementally. No, it's going to be violent. It's going to be violent because we have a systemic liquidity crisis. We have a geopolitical choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, and we have the Nostro-Vostro collapse pressure. You know, that's my theory, the accelerant that I see that's going just to make XRP shave years in the adoption and the increase of the PQ. These forces compress the timeline because they make XRP not an optional, but a necessary good. The Strait of Hormuz scenario changes everything. When Hormuz is disrupted, the oil settlement becomes unstable, forex corridors become volatile, United States dollar liquidity becomes fragmented, correspondent banking risk spikes, settlement delays multiply, Nostro-Vostro buffers must increase, banks can't increase trapped capital in a crisis. They must reduce it. This forces them toward instant settlement rails. XRP is the only neutral pre-positioned global liquidity settlement asset. So yes, the timeline collapses. Nostro-Vostro is not a nice to fix problem. It becomes existential. In a stable world, banks tolerate trillions frozen, slow settlement, forex friction, multi-day delays. In a crisis world, those became fatal weaknesses. When Vostro Nostro becomes a systemic liability, banks don't wait for perfect regulation, perfect clarity, perfect rulebooks. They move to whatever works, and XRP works. Tokenization cannot wait because liquidity cannot wait. Tokenization is not a tech upgrade. It's a liquidity unlock mechanism. In a stressed economy, banks need collateral, markets need settlement, treasuries need instant clearance, corporates need working capital, forex desks need predictable rails. Tokenization plus instant settlement becomes a survival tool, not an innovation. This accelerates XRP corridor adoption. So here's the corrected crisis regime timeline for XRP activation that I see. When I use the T, is the time since the clarity is being passed. I don't know when. We know we're in the time frame. We are in the deadline, or it's going to be moved to 2017. So I'm assuming that it's going to be approved in the next month or a few coming weeks. Starting with the markup approved, I am assuming it's going to be approved on the April 13 or that week, in 2 weeks. The clarity passed, making a law, I don't know. I cannot tell you when. But it will be in the coming weeks after the markup was approved. Banks begin internal corridor activation immediately after clarity. No waiting for rulemaking. Internal pilots, limited corridors, capped flows, treasury-only usage. PQ begins rising within weeks, not months. 30 days to 70 to 90 days since the Clarity Act timeline. Corridors will go semi-public. United States dollar, Mexican pesos, United States dollar, Philippine, United States dollar, Indian ruble, euros to British pound, euro to Swiss francs. Liquidity providers begin holding XRP structurally. Velocity will collapse. Effective supply starts shrinking. PQ ramps fast. Since the approval, 90 days to 180 days, 6 months, 3 months to 6 months. I see the corridors interlock, Forex desks, XRP rails, integrate Forex desks, integrate XRP rails. Banks reduce nostro-vostro buffers. They start reducing the nostro-vostro. Settlement cycles compress. Reuse multiplier activates. That's very important. Remember, I've been talking about reuse multiplier. 6 months, I'm seeing the reuse multiplier entering into action. This is where PQ jumps from hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars. And then, since the activation of the Clarity Act passed, 6 months to a year, full corridor activation. XRP doesn't need years. It needs a crisis, and the crisis is already here. The crisis regime PQ curve for XRP. T equals the day since clarity is signed. Crisis conditions compress adoption. So in a crisis, PQ does not grow linearly. It jumps in step functions as corridors start activating. 0 to 30 days, internal ignition. Banks begin using XRP internally for treasury settlement, internal forex netting, cross-entity transfers, liquidity rebalancing, and the PQ range moves from 0.3 trillion to 1 trillion. This is not public, but it is real flow. From 30 days since the Clarity Act being passed to 90 days, corridor ignition. The moment nostro-vostro buffers become a liability, banks activate external corridors. So you have the Forex exchanges. These are the highest friction corridors. So they move first. PQ range will be in the 1 trillion to 5 trillion. This is where the market realized XRP is not plumbing, not speculation. A lot of people will be crying when they see this in the 3 months after the Clarity Act. Then since the time frame of the Clarity Act being approved, 3 months to 180 days, network effect phase. Corridors interlock, liquidity providers hold XRP structurally, not tactically. Reuse multiplier activates, settlement cycles compress, Forex desk integrate XRP rails, banks reduce nostro-vostro buffers, PQ range, now we're going to be in the 5 trillions to 15 trillions. This is the first major repricing event that I am seeing. 6 months to a year since the Clarity Act, global settlement substrate. XRP is already the global settlement substrate. At this stage, multiple corridors share liquidity. Banks treat XRP as a neutral settlement asset. Tokenized treasuries, CBDCs begin routing through XRP rails. Derivatives margining experiments begin. PQ range now moves from 15 trillions to 30 trillions after a year. So I think 30 trillions or more after a year. This is where XRP enters the institutional valuation regime. PQ will be around 30 trillions. In a crisis regime, everything is assuming that we continue in this crisis, but the economy collapsing, the wars, which I think that's no other way. And this everything that we're seeing geopolitically speaking has been prearranged in a way, and this guy that we have in control right now in America, or not in control, depends on how you want to see it, it's the one that's going to activate the cows. I don't want to go into conspiracies right now, but we're going to see after a year 30 trillions. Velocity will be 0.5, reuse multiplier active after a year, financial velocity, usable supply. Remember, I'm using the term usable supply because this is post-clarity. It's not effective now, it's usable. 8 billion or 10 billions. I'm assuming that we have today 10 billions or 12 billion, that was more like 12 billions. And this is enough to run clean institutional scenarios. So let's build them with the structural precision that you guys expect. The core equation, you already know it. PQ divided by velocity times usable supply. So under crisis conditions, okay? Crisis conditions, PQ rises faster. Velocity stays low, 0.5. I believe that's going to be in the beginning. It's for institutional settlement. Those institutional velocities, usable supply compresses, custody, immobilization, corridor inventory, all leads to the shrinking of the supply. This is the perfect setup for non-linear repricing. Scenario number 1, PQ 30 trillions, velocity 0.5, supply 10 billions. We're going to have an XRP of $6,000, perhaps 6 months to a year, perhaps a year. Result, $6,000 per XRP. This is the conservative crisis regime scenario I'm seeing. Scenario number 2, if PQ reaches 30 trillions, a velocity of zero supply, 0.5, and instead of 10 billion, we are in 8 billions, then we're going to have an XRP of $7,500 per XRP. What we just proved is with a PQ of 30 trillions, a velocity of 0.5, and usable supply in the ranges of 8 billion or 10 billion, XRP mechanically enters 6,000 to 7,500 band. Now, I'm not modeling price, I'm modeling system requirements. If XRP is the global settlement asset, PQ rises, velocity collapses, supply compresses, corridors reuse, liquidity, banks, etc. So geopolitical stress accelerates this adoption. The system forces XRP to the thousands, not because of not because I say it, but because of math. So velocity 0.5 is the floor until 60 or 40 trillions. So this is a scenario very conservative. I'm going to show you later what is the real that I'm seeing, but I'm going conservative. I'm using a velocity of 0.5 with 60 trillions, and we know that that cannot happen. The velocity needs to shrink as well as the usable supply. So let's see. If we maintain at 0.5 with a PQ of 60 trillions and the same effective supply, we may end up with 6,000 to 7,500 XRP. That was on 30 trillion. But this is 40 trillion, early dense corridor phase, still velocity of 0.5, supply 10 billion. If we have 40 trillions, the only thing that changed is the PQ, using only PQ, okay? $8,000 per XRP. If the supply is 8 billion instead of 10, with a 40 trillion PQ, it's $10,000 per XRP in a matter of a year or so. We will be in the range of 8,000 to 10 grand XRP. If the PQ equals 60 trillions, the velocity is 0.5, supply 10 billion, everything the same, but we increase only the PQ. No, you guys know that is not going to happen because the supply and the velocity will simultaneously shrink as the PQ increase. But I'm trying to go as conservative as I can be, playing only with the PQ. We're going to have a $12,000 or $15,000 per XRP, enough to retire us all. So we're going to be in the ratio of 12,000 to 15,000 per XRP. At this point, we're all retired. We won the game, and that's it. Only after this point, PQ 60 trillions, does it make structural sense to let velocity compress below 0.5. I think, yeah, that maybe 40 also will compress it, but I've been using a very extreme conservative scenario. So that one will move us into the 20,000, changing PQ without changing velocity, which is not what's going to happen, but I'm going conservative, only playing with the PQ. By refusing to let velocity 0.5 before PQ 60 trillion, I'm keeping the model conservative, forcing PQ to do the heavy lifting first, delaying the phase where velocity collapse drives explosive repricing. You know that I'm doing this to make it conservative, but you know that the velocity and the supply will go down simultaneously. And even under conservative constraint, the math still forces 6 to 7,000, 8 to 10,000, 12 to 15,000, playing only with the PQ. Just mathematics, guys. Now, at 40 trillion or more, supply will be lower than 8 or 10, right? Once PQ is in the 40 trillion band, usable supply cannot realistically still be 8 billion or 10 billion. Corridor inventory, custodian mobilization, regulatory lockups, staking, banks removing it from the system will compress it further. So once PQ hits 40 trillion and usable supply compresses to 7 billion, the system is already in a state where velocity cannot remain at 0.5. So why velocity drop below 0.5 at 40 trillion and a supply of 7 billion? Velocity is not a free variable. It's emergent from corridor density, liquidity reuse, settlement frequency, inventory immobilization or custody, risk constraints, clearing requirements. So PQ reaches 40 trillion, 3 structural pressures forces velocity down. Corridor reuse becomes mandatory, not optional. At a PQ of 40 trillions, the same PQ inventory is clearing multiple corridors, multiple cycles per day with overlapping time windows under stress liquidity conditions. This automatically reduces velocity because the same tokens are busy more often. Now, use more often doesn't mean higher velocity. It means higher throughput, not higher velocity. Make it clear. Velocity in monetary mechanics is how many times the asset changes owners per unit time. Corridor reuse is not velocity in the same velocity. Corridor reuse is how many times the same XRP is reused inside the same custody pool without changing owners. That's when I'm referring when it's going to be used more. A whole different thing. When XRP is reused inside a corridor, it is busy, but it's not moving. This is key. When PQ reaches 40 trillions, the same XRP stack is clearing multiple corridors, multiple cycles per day inside the same custody pools, without leaving the liquidity providers or banks' control. That means high throughput, low velocity, because velocity only increases when XRP moves between owners or wallets. But in corridor reuse, XRP stays in the same custody account. The same LP holds it, the same banks hold it, the same corridor inventory is reused. So velocity drops even though throughput rises. Remember the collateral reuse multiplier that I explained you. They're using the collateral, not the XRP, multiple times, 20 times. So the XRP is not being moved. It's in the same place, but people is using the collateral. As an example, think of a factory machine. If the machine runs 24/7, throughput is high, but the machine itself doesn't move. It stays bolted to the floor. XRP in corridor reuse is the machine. It works harder, it processes more, it clears more value, but it does not move. Therefore, the throughput increases, the velocity goes down. While velocity must drop at PQ of 40 trillion. At this level, corridor inventory becomes sticky. Banks and liquidity providers must hold XRP in deeper buffers. Settlement cycles overlap. The same XRP is locked in use more often. Custody immobilization increases. Custody, people not moving it. They're using yield, using XRP as a collateral, as a yield engine. More XRP sits in institutional accounts, not exchanges. Risk desks require static balances. They cannot allow XRP to float between owners. All this reduces movement even as usage increases. So the correct interpretation after we understand the velocity moves down simultaneously with the usable supply, if XRP is used more often, shouldn't velocity increase? Only if used more often meant changes owners more often. But in institutional settlement, XRP is used more often without changing owners, so velocity falls. This is why PQ goes vertical while velocity collapses. A PQ of 40 trillions, throughput explodes, corridor reuse is mandatory, XRP is busy but not moving, supply compresses, velocity drops from 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, and that's exactly why PQ rises, velocity drops, and supply drops, equals price appreciation. So this is the structural reason XRP enters the 14,000, 20,000 band at 40 trillion PQ. So I'll see this in a year or so. Everything depends on when the Clarity Act is being passed, not the markup. Now we're using the correct velocity logic. I'm not using only PQ just to make it conservative. I'm using everything the way it's supposed to be used. So more usage equals higher velocity. Mistake that retail makes, not the naive idea that more usage equals higher velocity. I explain you what velocity is and what reuse, liquidity reuse is. So I'm modeling institutional settlement mechanics here, guys, where throughput goes up, movement goes down, velocity goes down, and that changes the entire ladder. So the consolidated XRP ladder with correct velocity logic, not only fixing the PQ. This is pure version, okay? Phase one, when XRP moves 10 trillions, velocity will be 0.5, usable supply will be in the 10 billions, the price will be 2,000 to 2,500. Immediately after the Clarity Act, I'll see that. Phase number two, when the PQ reaches 20 trillion, the velocity will be 0.5, the supply will be 8 billions. Now we're going to be around $5,000 per XRP. This will go into happen very fast. Phase 3, PQ of 30 trillion, velocity 0.5, the velocity and the supply still in the 8 or 7. We're going to be in the 7,500, 8,500. And now phase 4, we can maintain the same velocity and we can maintain the same supply. So the supply will drop from 8 to 6 or 7. The velocity now drops to 0.3 or 0.4. And now we use the correct math. The velocity is 0.4, a supply of 7 billion. If you use the formula, you're going to get to 14,000 to 16,000. A velocity 0.3 and a supply of 7 to 6. I'm using two velocities, 0.4 and 0.35. You can see that starts increasing exponentially. So we're going to be in phase 4 when the PQ reaches 40 trillions. I see it at $40,000 to $20,000. This is the phase where corridor reuse is mandatory and velocity must drop. Phase number 5, it's when XRP now it's in the 60 trillion, it's full density, velocity 0.3, usable supply, now it dropped to 5 to 6 billions. That's all there is existing right now. Velocity now is 0.3, supply is 6 billion or 5 billion. If we're in this 6 billion with a velocity of 0.3 and a 60 trillion PQ, now the asset will be $33,000. And if it drops to 5 billion, we're going to be in the $40,000. This is the systemic criticality phase. So this is the table that I made with a 12 to 18 month XRP price ladder. First 3 months, PQ will be in the 5 to 10 trillion, velocity 0.5, 0. It's gonna be a little bit higher in the beginning, maybe 1. I remember I told you in the beginning that the velocity will remain high, but it will take 3 months for that thing just to start dropping. Usable supply will be in the 8 or 12. 10 to 12, maybe 8 to 10. So we gotta be around 2,000 and 2,500 in the first month, 3 to 6 months. When the PQ moves to 30 trillion, maybe it's gonna take 9 months, maybe it's gonna take a year. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But all I'm telling you is these prices are going to happen. I don't know the timing yet. Velocity will be 0.5 at that time, 7 to 8 billion. We're going to be in the 5 to 8,600. At this time, it's almost like we're millionaire guys. 9 to 15 months, the PQ will be in the 30 to 40 trillions. Velocity now drop to 0.3, 0.4. The usable supply will be in the 6 to 7 billions. Now we're talking about very, very low, near zero. Velocities are near zero. Supply going to be in the $14,000 to $20,000. And after 18 months, year and a half, we're going to have a PQ of 60 trillion. Velocity will be in 0.3. Going to be in the 5 to 6 billions. We're going to be in the $17,000 to $40,000 per XRP. Yes, these prices are not crazy. You guys can accept Bitcoin, but you cannot accept XRP becoming the number 1 asset in the universe. This is the corrected final structurally consistent XRP valuation ladder under a crisis regime PQ, supply compression, corridor reuse, nostril unwind, and the correct velocity mechanics. There is no hype here. This is institutional settlement math. So once PQ hits 40 trillion and supply compresses to 7 billion in velocity, must drop to 0.5 towards 0.4, 0.3, etc. This is because corridor reuse increase, inventory immobilization increase, settlement overlap increase, liquidity provision buffers increase, movement decrease. Throughput increases, but velocity falls. I explained this. This is why the price band jumps from $14,000 to $20,000 when we reach a PQ of 40 trillion. The 15 to year and a half band is the systemic criticality. A PQ of 60 trillion, supply of 5 billion, 6 billion, velocity collapse to 0.3. We're going to see an XRP of $33,000 to $40,000 XRP even before derivatives. All these numbers are not taking in consideration derivative. When derivative arrives, that will be another story. I don't want to go there right now. That's for another day. This ladder is still pre-derivatives. Once derivatives settle on XRP rails, PQ jumps to 80 to 100 trillions or more, pushing the upper band into the 44, 66, and even more. But that's outside the 12 year and a half month window. Okay, so I don't want to go there right now. We're going to be very happy if we are already seeing this number. The world is still in a liquidity crisis, and it's not cyclical, it's structural. A liquidity crisis isn't just market stress. It's when the architecture that moves money stops functioning. Right now, banks are hoarding liquidity, collateral quality is unstable, margin requirements are rising, cross-border settlement is slowing, correspondent banking is breaking under stress. This is the exact environment where nostro vostro becomes fatal, because trapped capital cannot move to meet obligations. And we're seeing this. Anyone that understands financials can tell you that this is a fact. And when capital cannot move, settlement freezes. That's the definition of a liquidity crisis. The petrodollar isn't declining, it's structurally broken. When major oil exporters accept yuan instead of the United States dollar, the consequences are not symbolic, they are mechanical. Fewer United States dollar settlement flows, fewer United States dollar recycling loops, fewer United States dollars reserve held abroad, less global demand for United States dollar liquidity, less United States dollar collateral in the system. This weakens the United States dollar role as the global settlement anchor. And when the anchor weakens, the system must find a neutral one. You already know that Iran and China and Russia are not selling in dollars. So the petrodollar is dead. So Iran plus Middle East selling oil in yuan is the break point. This is the part most people misunderstand. When Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others sell oil in yuan, the United States dollar is no longer the mandatory settlement currency. The United States cannot enforce settlement rails. Forex volatility increases. Cross-border liquidity becomes fragmented. The global system becomes multipolar. This is not a political shift. It's a settlement layer fracture. And fractures at the settlement layer always force the emergence of a neutral bridge asset. Historically, gold, SDR, currency baskets, but none of these can settle in real time, globally digital, with finality or states neutral. So a neutral settlement asset becomes inevitable. Why a neutral settlement asset becomes mandatory in a multipolar world? When the United States can dominate, the yuan can be trusted globally, the euro is too fragmented, the yen is too fragile, gold is too slow, SDR are too political, the system must adopt a settlement asset that is neutral, supranational, real-time, final, programmable, collateral efficient, global accessible, politically agnostic. This is the exact profile of a neutral digital settlement asset that we know as XRP. And XRP is the only asset designed from day one, many years ago, maybe more than a decade ago, as a bridge currencies, to settle instantly, to operate without counterparty risk, to scale to trillions. Yes, it was made to scale to trillions, so my PQs are not nonsense. Function as a liquidity substrate. This is not ideology, it's mechanical fit. So why the crisis accelerates XRP PQ curve? When the world fractures into United States dollar settlement, yuan settlement, rupee settlement, euro settlement, crypto settlement, the only way to maintain global liquidity is through a neutral bridge. That's what I mean with multipolar currencies, multipolar economies. That cannot happen. You need something that unites everything. Why my conclusion is correct. The debt of the petrodollar plus the liquidity crisis equal neutral settlement becomes inevitable. Not optional, not ideological, not speculative. Inevitable. Because the alternative is settlement freezes, cascading defaults, collateral shortages, people cannot meet their obligations, forex volatility, cross-border payment failures, systemic liquidity collapse, people not capable of paying their homes, mortgages, rent, car payments. No central bank can fix this alone. Derivative crisis, we're going to see defaults in the student loans, etc. No national currency can anchor it. No bilateral system can scale. Only a neutral supranational real-time settlement asset can. And that's exactly why my XRP scenario ladder works, because it's not based on hype, but on global settlement mechanics under stress. So we watch the timing, we watch the numbers, because you guys are going to be very, very rich. As I said, I cannot guarantee the timing exactly, whether earlier or a little bit later, but I don't think it's going to be much longer than all these time frames that I'm presenting you here. The economy, the crisis, the collapse, the systemic geopolitics of the world, the finance, is facing extinction. It requires a solution, an immediate solution. And this is where we are right now. And I explain you why we are in a liquidity crisis and why I don't see that we're going to get out of a war immediately without doing anything. This is a systemic failure and requires drastic measurements. And as I said, the Clarity Act will be passed this year. It won't be past 2027. Ignore all those doomers and gloomers. I'm telling you, after the markup is passed on April the 13th or that week, it will be very, very, very fast until they pass that. See you in my next video, guys.